Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. For all you UPSC aspirants out there, we need to keep up with current affairs, and
Absolutely.
one that's always on the radar is India and China.
Definitely crucial. And, the Hindu had some good coverage on this recently, some interesting developments.
Yeah, India's foreign secretary just wrapped up a visit to China,
Right.
and there's talk about bringing back things like the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. Sounds promising, but can we really ignore the elephant in the room?
Right, the border situation.
Exactly.
It's complicated. And here's a fascinating angle to former U.S. President Donald Trump. And his return to the political scene is actually playing a role.
Wait, Trump? I thought we were talking about Asia.
I know, right? It seems unrelated. But think about it. If Trump wins a second term, he might restart that trade war with China, bring back sanctions, and take a hard line.
So China's thinking, better smooth things over with India now before things get messy with the U.S. again.
Exactly. Having a stable relationship with India would be a buffer for China against any pressure from the U.S. It just shows how interconnected global politics are. Important thing to remember for your UPSC prep.
That's a great point. It's all part of a bigger game.
Yeah.
But speaking of bigger games, China's economy is not exactly thriving.
Hmm.
Remember the Evergrande collapse? They've got other issues too.
Yeah, you're right. They're facing serious problems.
Uh-huh.
A property market in crisis, slowing growth. All this internal pressure is another reason why a stable relationship with India is so appealing.
Makes sense. India's economy is doing quite well, becoming a major player globally.
Hmm.
So China needs access to that, especially if their own economy is struggling. It puts India in a good spot, right?
For sure. It's a very interesting situation because while China wants stability, India is not just giving in, they're standing firm, particularly on those border issues.
Which brings us back to the LAC, the line of actual control. That's the de facto border between them. We hear about all these diplomatic efforts, but is India being transparent about what's happening on the ground?
That's a great question and a point of a lot of debate. We know there have been talks, troop movements, but the details are unclear. The Indian government is being pretty quiet about the LAC situation.
So it's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Hmm,
Could this lack of transparency be strategic?
could be. A little ambiguity can be helpful in these
Right.
situations.
Really?
Yeah, it gives you some flexibility, some room to maneuver. If everything is out in the open, it's harder to make compromises.
So a little strategic silence helps to get a deal. But isn't that risky? I mean, this lack of transparency could create distrust, fuel speculation.
Oh, definitely. And that's what India is dealing with. On the one hand, they need to be discreet. On the other, they need to maintain credibility, keep the public informed. Tough balance.
And for our UPSC folks, this shows another side of things, the role of information, or the lack of it.
Right. It's like information warfare.
Yeah,
Controlling the narrative becomes a key tactic.
for sure. So how should we understand these developments in the big picture of India-China relations? Is this real progress towards stability, or just a temporary pause?
Well, you have to remember, India-China relations are complex. Long history,
Okay.
cooperation and tension,
Border conflicts, economic competition.
all that. Exactly. It's constantly changing.
So history tells us not to get too excited about a few diplomatic gestures.
Right. There's a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And despite these efforts to stabilize things, some fundamental differences remain.
Like what?
Well, look at their alliances. India is becoming closer to the West, especially the U.S. China sees that as a threat.
Hmm.
And then you have the territorial disputes, not just the LAC, but in the maritime domain too.
Right. The South China Sea.
Exactly. China's being assertive there, causing concern for India and others.
And we can't forget the economic rivalry.
Of course. As India grows, it's competing with China for resources, markets, influence.
So even though it makes sense for them to cooperate,
Ah.
there's this underlying tension.
Yeah, it's like juggling two different sets of priorities.
So India needs to engage with China economically while protecting its own security.
Exactly, a real diplomatic tightrope walk.
It is a tightrope walk. So to recap what we've learned for our UPSC folks, we started with China's push for stability.
Right. We looked at the global situation like Trump's possible return, China's economic woes, and of course, India's own economic growth.
And those factors all feed into China's desire for a more predictable relationship.
Exactly.
Then we talked about the lack of transparency around the LAC.
Right, how that raises questions about India's strategy and the need for clearer communication.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, flexibility, but also potential for distrust.
And finally, we look at history.
Important to understand the cycles of cooperation and conflict.
This is all crucial for the UPSC exams,
Right.
connecting the dots, seeing the big picture.
Absolutely. It's not about memorizing. It's about understanding.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, the India-China relationship needs constant attention.
It's dynamic, always
Yeah.
evolving.
Huge implications for everyone. Okay, so we've really gotten into the weeds on India-China relations. It's this tightrope walk for India. And for you UPSC folks out there, understanding this is key. But what are some of the biggest hurdles India faces with all this?
Well, one of the toughest things is trust. Decades of border disputes, rivalry, different ways of seeing the world, it all adds up to suspicion. It's hard to make real progress without trust.
Right, you can't just erase all that tension.
Right.
But how can India even start to build trust when their interests clash so much?
It starts with talking openly and honestly, addressing concerns, making intentions clear, avoiding anything provocative. That can help reduce misunderstandings and build some confidence.
So it's the day-to-day stuff, keeping those lines of communication open, not just the big meetings and summits.
Exactly. And finding common ground. Despite all the differences, India and China both want economic development, regional stability, fighting terrorism. Focusing on those things can help.
Right. Even rivals can work together.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears for a second. What opportunities does this whole situation create for India?
Well, look at China's economy. It's slowing down. That's a chance for India. Global supply chains are diversifying. Companies are looking for alternatives. India's got a young workforce, a growing economy that could become a major manufacturing hub.
So India can use its economic strengths, even with China's struggles? That's a big plus.
Absolutely. And it's not just about money. India is a democracy. It's got strong partnerships with other democracies. They can use that to balance China's growing influence.
That's soft power, right? Using values and alliances to shape things.
Exactly. And for those studying for the UPSC, that's a crucial concept. It's not just about military or money. It's about building relationships, promoting your values.
So to wrap up this deep dive on India-China relations,
Mm-hmm.
it's clear India's got both challenges and opportunities.
Right.
What's the most important takeaway for our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC?
It's this. The India-China relationship isn't a zero-sum game. It's not about one side winning. It's about managing the competition, finding trust, working together when it makes sense.
And that takes a smart strategic approach, one that understands how complex it all is, doesn't oversimplify things, uses India's strengths while navigating the challenges.
Exactly. Think critically. Look at things from different angles and form your own opinions based on facts. That's what the UPSC is looking for.
Great. So we've covered a lot today. The dynamics, the challenges, the opportunities, and some key takeaways for all you UPSC aspirants.
Remember, things are always changing, so stay informed, keep learning, keep questioning.
Big thanks to The Hindu for their analysis. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more UPSC content. And if you have any questions, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.